This boy is a thief, a big one. He has been stealing from you since last year. I have proof.
It's a lie, ma. Are you calling me innocent?
Kwemeka Okafo left his mother's compound in Newi. The harmattan was still thick in the air, dusting the mango trees with a pale, dry film. He was 16 years old, lean and bright-eyed, with the kind of face that made old women stop and say, "This one, God carved him with care." His mother, Mama Emeka, had tied his few clothes into a bag and pressed a small Bible into his chest. "Serve well," she said, her voice steady, even as her eyes were not. "Your hands are your character. Whatever you do, let it be clean." He nodded, not yet knowing how heavy those words would one day become. He was going to serve Chief Ogbonna Dike, a big man in Onitsha, a trader of auto parts and building materials who had built his empire the same way, through the Igba Odeshi system, the apprenticeship that was the backbone of Igbo commerce. A young man goes, he serves, he learns the trade, he sweeps the floor, he counts the goods, he wakes before sunrise and sleeps after the generator goes off. And if he is faithful, if he endures, his master settles him, gives him money, goods, sometimes a shop, and sends him into the world to build his own name. It was not slavery, it was a covenant. Chukwuemeka understood this. He embraced it with both hands. In those first 2 years, Emeka became the kind of apprentice masters spoke about with satisfaction. He memorized prices without being told twice. He arranged the warehouse with a logic that made stock-taking faster. He could charm a difficult customer into leaving with twice what they came to buy, not through tricks, but through genuine warmth and a patience that seemed older than his years. Chief Ogbonna noticed. He began to bring Emeka to meetings, to let him speak to suppliers, to trust him with the keys to the inner store. The other boys in the compound teased him. "Emeka, you want to carry master's briefcase to heaven?" He would laugh and say nothing. He had a plan, and the plan required time. It was in the 3rd year that he met Adaize. She sold fresh tomatoes and pepper in the market nearby, and she had a laugh like a bell, sudden, honest, filling whatever space it entered. She was not rich, she was not educated beyond secondary school, but she had a goodness about her that Emeka could not explain and did not try to. They began to talk, then to walk, then to dream quietly together about the future, about a shop of his own, about a life that would be theirs. "Wait for me," he told her once, as they sat by the roadside eating roasted corn. "Just 2 more years, let me finish well, then I will come for you properly." She smiled and said, "I am not going anywhere." He believed her. That belief kept him sharp. It was also in the 3rd year that Madame Chisom arrived. She was Chief Ogbonna's second wife, younger than the first by nearly 15 years, which meant she was perhaps 32 to Emeka's now 19. She was a beautiful woman, no one could deny that, with smooth dark skin and an elegance that came partly from money and partly from the way she carried herself as though the world owed her attention. She got it, usually, without asking. When she looked at Emeka the first time, really looked at him, the way that is different from ordinary looking, he felt it like a cold finger on the back of his neck. He said nothing. He lowered his eyes respectfully, as a young man in the house of his master should, and went back to his work. But Madame Chisom was not the kind of woman who accepted silence as an answer. It began with small things, as these things always do. She would call him to carry something that did not need carrying. She would ask him questions about his home, his family, his plans, personal questions that a master's wife had no business asking. She would linger in doorways when he was passing. She would find reasons for her hand to brush his when passing him a plate of food. Emeka was not foolish. He saw it all clearly, and it terrified him, not because of her, but because of everything she represented. She was the wife of the man who held his future in his hands. She was the wall that, if he leaned against, would bring down the entire house he had spent 3 years building brick by brick. He became careful, politely distant. He never ate the food she brought separately. He never stayed in a room alone with her if he could help. If she appeared, he found a reason to be elsewhere. The other boys noticed his unease, but not its cause. He told no one, not even Adaize. What would he say? "The master's wife wants me." Words like that, once spoken, become fires. One evening, near the end of the 3rd year, the compound was quiet. Chief Ogbonna was traveling. The first wife was visiting relatives. The younger apprentices were asleep. Madame Chisom came to where Emeka was reading in the small corridor outside the store, and she sat beside him without invitation. She was wearing a wrapper loosely tied, and she smelled of good perfume, the kind that was designed to make a young man forget his prayers. She spoke softly. "Emeka, You are not like these other small boys. You are a man, and a man should not be sleeping alone on a mat while a woman sleeps alone in a big bed. Emeka closed his book slowly. He looked at her, not with desire, but with the kind of sorrow that comes when you see someone walking towards a cliff. He said, "Madam, Chief Ogbonna has been good to me. His house is my father's house while I am here. I cannot bring shame to this roof. I beg you, let us not speak this way again." Her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes cooled. "You are rejecting me? I am protecting us both," he said. "Good night, madam." He stood up, tucked his book under his arm, and walked to where the other boys slept. He did not sleep that night. He should have known that a woman like Madam Chisom did not absorb rejection quietly. The accusations began in the 4th year, slow at first, then gathering like a storm. A bag of money went missing from the inner store. Madam Chisom told Chief Ogbonna she had seen Emeka near it. Emeka swore on his mother's life he had not touched it. The bag was eventually found, tucked behind a shelf where anyone could have placed it, but the seed of suspicion had already been planted. Then, goods were shot in a delivery. Madam Chisom whispered to the chief that the apprentices had been selling from the back, and Emeka's name was the first on her tongue. A customer complained that he had been rude. Emeka had never been rude to a customer in 3 years. Chief Ogbonna frowned and said nothing, but the frown stayed. The other apprentices began to watch Emeka with sideways eyes. Gossip has a smell, and the compound had begun to fill with it. One evening, Chief Ogbonna called Emeka to his parlor. He was a heavy man, the chief, not just in body, but in presence. When he sat in that chair, the room seemed to arrange itself around him. He looked at Emeka for a long time before speaking. "People are talking about you," he said. "Sir, I know," Emeka replied, "and I know who is talking, but I will not say what I know because it is not my place to bring trouble to your house. What I will say is this: look at my 4 years here. Look at my hands. Look at my records. Judge me by that, not by words." Chief Ogbonna was quiet. "Why would my wife have reason to speak against you?" Emeka held the old man's gaze. "Sir, I cannot answer that question without bringing a greater pain to you. Please do not ask me to." The chief stared at him for a long time. Then he said, "Go." Emeka did not know what the chief understood or chose not to understand. Perhaps a man of the world like Chief Ogbonna could read between silences. Perhaps he had watched his young wife before and recognized the pattern. Perhaps he was simply tired. What Emeka knew was that after that conversation, Madam Chisom's campaign against him grew louder, as though she sensed that the direct route had failed and now required an explosion. She began to speak of him in front of visitors. She would make cutting remarks at dinner. She staged a scene one afternoon, weeping before 2 women from the church that Emeka had been disrespectful to her, had looked at her in a bad way, had been ungrateful for the kindness of this house. The 2 women from the church looked at Emeka. He stood there, hands at his sides, face composed. He said nothing. He had learned something in 4 years in commerce. Sometimes, the customer who is screaming the loudest is the one who knows they are wrong, and the worst thing you can do is scream back. The confrontation that nearly ended everything came 6 weeks before his 5th year mark. Chief Ogbonna had called a meeting of all the apprentices to discuss a new supply arrangement. Madam Chisom entered the room uninvited, which was unusual. Her eyes were bright with something that looked like decision. She pointed at Emeka. "This boy," she said, "has been stealing from you since last year. I have proof. He has been collecting money from customers and not writing it in the book." The room went still. Chief Ogbonna looked at her, then at Emeka. Emeka felt his heart hammering. He thought of his mother. He thought of Adaize. He thought of 5 years of sunrises before anyone else was awake, 5 years of counting bolts and nails in the afternoon heat, 5 years of patience and precision and choosing the right thing over and over again. He thought of all of it turning to dust because of a woman who could not accept the word no. He stood up.
"Chief," he said, his voice steady as a road, "I have served you for 4 years and 11 months. In that time, you can check every record, every ledger, every invoice. Call any customer I have ever attended to. I have never taken a kobo that was not mine." He turned to face Madam Chisom directly, respectfully, but directly. "And Madam, you know this is not true. You know why you are saying what you are saying. And God, who sees everything, He also knows." The room held its breath. Madam Chisom's face darkened with fury. She turned to her husband, expecting him to act, to shout, to send the boy away. Chief Ogbonna looked at his wife for a long moment. Then he looked at Emeka. "Leave the room," he said quietly. "Both of you." No one in the compound slept well that night. There were raised voices from the chief's wing, then silence, then more silence. In the morning, Chief Ogbonna came to where Emeka was sweeping the store before dawn, as he always did. He stood and watched him sweep. Finally, he said, "I have been in business for 30 years. I know a thief's record and an honest man's record. Yours is an honest man's record." Emeka stopped sweeping. "Finish your time," the chief said. "Do not let anything distract you. When your 5 years are complete, I will settle you. That is my word." He walked away. Emeka leaned on his broom and let out a breath that felt like it had been stored in his chest for months. The final year passed with a quietness that felt almost holy. Madam Chisom retreated. Whether from shame or from the silent boundary her husband had clearly drawn, Emeka did not know and did not investigate. He simply worked, he simply waited. He saw Adaeze twice during that period, once at the market to the gate to meet her. She noticed something different in her face, a kind of seasoning that had not been there before. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I will be. Very soon I will be." On the morning of his settlement, Chief Ogbonna sat him down privately before the formal ceremony. He gave him goods, a full consignment of building materials worth 300,000 naira. He gave him startup capital. He gave him a letter of introduction to 3 major suppliers. But before all of that, he said something Emeka never forgot. The hardest test of a man's character is not poverty, it is opportunity. The opportunity to do wrong when no one is looking, and the opportunity to take something that seems to be offered freely. Many men have destroyed their own futures with both hands, chasing what was not theirs to have. He looked at Emeka steadily. "I saw you pass that test. That is why I am trusting you with this." Emeka received everything with both hands, as the custom demands, a gesture of humility and gratitude. He returned to Newi and went first to his mother's house. She took one look at him and began to cry, not from sadness, but from the particular relief of a woman who had prayed and had lived to see the answer walk through her door. 3 months later, he opened a small shop. 6 months after that, he expanded. 1 year after his settlement, he went properly to Adaeze's family with wine and kola nut and the people of his family beside him, and he asked for her hand the right way, in the full light of day, with nothing to hide. She had waited. He had endured. And everything that patience had protected was now, finally, his to keep. In Igbo, there is a saying, "Onyi wetera oji, wetera ndu." He who brings kola nut brings life. But the elders also say this, "Obu onyi nwere ura na ata ura oma." It is the one with a clear conscience who sleeps well. The shop was small enough that Emeka could touch both walls if he stretched his arms wide. He did this on the first morning, stood in the center of the empty concrete space on the main road in Nnewi, arms out like a man measuring something invisible, and laughed. A real laugh, the kind that starts in the belly and surprises even the person releasing it. It was his. Every crack in the wall, every inch of dusty floor, his. He had named it quietly in his heart before he even painted the signboard, Oka for building supplies and general merchandise. When the sign painter finished it in bold red and white letters, Emeka stood across the road and looked at his own name on a building for the first time in his life. He stood there so long that a keke driver slowed down thinking he needed a ride. His mother came on the 3rd day with a pot of ofe onogbu, palm oil still warm, and a small bunch of garden eggs wrapped in newspaper. She walked through the shop slowly, touching the shelves he had built himself, looking at the neat rows of cement bags, iron rods, and roofing nails he had arranged with the same logic he had developed in Chief Ogbonna's warehouse. Then she sat on the wooden bench by the door and folded her hands in her lap. "Emeka," she said, "Ma, tell me what happened in that house." He had told her nothing specific, only that it had been difficult, only that he had endured. He sat beside her now and was quiet for a long time, watching a downful bus rattle past on the road outside, trailing dust and fumes. Then he told her everything. She listened without interrupting. That was one of the things about his mother that had always made him feel safe. She did not rush the story. She let it come at its own pace, like water finding its level. When he finished, the shop was very quiet. She reached out and placed her rough, warm hand over his. "You are your father's son," she said softly. Her voice had something in it that he had not heard before, a fullness, like a cup that had just been filled to the brim. You would have done the same. His father had died when Emeka was 11. He almost never spoke of him because the grief of him was still something tender, like a wound that had healed but left the skin thin in that spot. He nodded and said nothing. She squeezed his hand once, then stood and went to warm the soup. Business in the first 3 months was humbling. Some days he sold almost nothing. He would sit by the door of the shop from 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening and watch potential customers walk past, glance at his small display, and keep walking to the bigger, more established shops further down the road. He did not panic. He had been an apprentice long enough to know that panic was the enemy of strategy. Instead, he did what he had always done. He watched, he learned, and he used his greatest tool, which was not money or goods, but people. He began greeting every person who passed, whether they stopped or not. He learnt the names of the mama puts nearby, the welders across the street, the block-making men 3 compounds down. He extended small credit to customers he had read carefully, men who had the face of people who paid their debts, and he followed up gently, not aggressively. Word began to move, as word does in a Nigerian market. That new boy on the junction, he is honest. He doesn't measure short. He doesn't inflate price when he thinks you don't know. By the 4th month, the shop had found its breath. Adaeze came on a Saturday morning with her friend, Ngozi, both of them carrying market bags, pretending they had simply been passing. Emeka saw through this immediately and said nothing. He served Ngozi first, some nails she had come to buy for her uncle, and then turned to Adaeze with a face arranged into professional neutrality. "And you, madam, what can I help you with?" Adaeze looked around the shop slowly, lips pressed together to suppress a smile. "I am looking," she said, "for a man who promised me something." "What did he promise?" "He said he would come for me properly. It has been almost a year since his settlement. He has been building something first, so that when he comes with something in his hands." Ngozi, pretending to examine a packet of roofing nails with deep concentration, made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. Adaeze tilted her head. Her eyes were dancing. "And is he ready now?" Emeka leaned on the counter, and for the first time since she had walked in, he let the professional neutrality fall away, and he was just himself, a young man in his own shop, looking at the woman he had held in his mind like a compass for 5 years. "Almost," he said. "Give me 2 more months." She gave him 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks, Emeka moved with a quiet urgency. He went to his mother and his 2 uncles and sat with them properly, speaking as a man, not a boy. He laid out what he had saved, what the shop was earning, what his plans were. He spoke of Adaeze's character, her patience, her groundedness, her family. His eldest uncle, Iche Okafor, a retired teacher with sharp eyes and a habit of testing young people before approving of them, listened to everything and then asked one question. "Why this girl?" Emeka thought for a moment. "Because she waited. I told her to wait and she waited. A woman who can hold to a promise in a season that is difficult, that is the kind of person you build a life beside." His eldest uncle looked at his sister, Emeka's mother, and something passed between them that he could not read. Then the old man nodded slowly. "Go and greet her family. We will follow." The visit to Adaeze's family compound was a Saturday affair. Emeka's people arrived in the early afternoon. His mother, his 2 uncles, 3 older women from the family, and 2 of his cousins carrying the items: a bottle of schnapps, palm wine in a clay pot, kola nut on a wooden plate, garden eggs, and a modest but carefully chosen envelope. Adaeze's father, a quiet man named Maziezi, who fixed motorcycles and spoke mostly through his eyebrows, received them under the shade of the compound's big udara tree. There was the formal exchange, the drinks, the breaking of kola, the prayers that wove together Christian and traditional, as is the way in most Igbo homes, because people who have survived as long as the Igbo have learn to pray from every direction. Then Adaeze was called out. She came wearing a yellow Ankara dress and gold earrings, and she walked the way women walk when they are trying very hard not to look like they are trying very hard. Her natural hair was out, full and soft around her face, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity that Emeka's chest tightened. Her father looked at her, then at Emeka, then back at her daughter. "Do you know this person?" he asked. It was the traditional question. Its simplicity contained words. "I know him, Papa," she said. Mazieze was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for his cup of palm wine. "Then let us drink," he said. They were not yet married. That ceremony would take more planning, more saving, more family meetings across 2 towns. But the introduction was done. The intention was declared. Both families had pressed their hands together over the matter, and in Igbo custom, that handshake carries the weight of an anchor. On the drive back to Nnewi, Emeka's mother sat beside him in the front of his cousin's car and looked straight ahead at the road. "Your father proposed to me with 2 yams and a Bible," she said. Emeka glanced at her. "And?" She said, "And I said yes." She smiled at the windshield. Because it was not the yams, it was the way he looked when he offered them, like they were the most valuable things in the world, because he was giving them to me. Emeka turned back to the road. "Did I look like that today?" Her mother laughed, a small private laugh. "Worse," she said. "You looked completely terrified." He laughed too, and the car filled it with it, and the road opened ahead of them in the late afternoon light. 3 months after the introduction, something unexpected arrived. A letter. It came through a mutual contact in Onitsha, a man who knew the Dike household. It was not from Chief Ogbonna. The chief communicated through action, not paper. It was from Madam Chisom. Emeka held the envelope for a long time before opening it. He was alone in the shop, late on a Thursday, the street outside going quiet as traders packed up. A gecko moved across the wall above his head. He opened it. The letter was short, 3 paragraphs. The handwriting was neat and careful, which told him she had rewritten it more than once. The first paragraph said that she had heard he was doing well, and that she was glad. The second said she understood now. Those were her exact words. "I understand now." That what she had done was wrong. That a young person's future is not something to be played with for pride's sake. The third paragraph said only this: "I am sorry for what I tried to make you carry. You carried it better than I deserved." There was no signature, just initials, C.D. Emeka read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, placed it back in the drawer beneath the counter where he kept important papers. He did not show it to anyone, not his mother, not Adaeze, not his uncles. Some things are between a person and their conscience, and the closing of a chapter should be private. He locked the drawer, turned off the generator, and walked home under a sky full of stars, and he felt not triumph, not vindication, not even relief exactly, but something quieter than all of those. He felt clean.
The shop grew. Within a year of the introduction, Emeka had taken on his first apprentice, a 14-year-old boy named Tobechukwu, from his mother's village, the third son of a family with more children than money, which was a situation Emeka understood completely. He remembered what it felt like to arrive in a strange place with a bag of clothes and no certainty. On Tobechukwu's first day, Emeka sat him down before the shop opened and said to him what no one had said to him at 16. "This is not just a job. This is a school. Every day you are here, you are learning something, not just about goods and prices, but about how to be a person in business. Watch everything. Ask questions. Never steal, not even a kobo, because your character is the only thing that will follow you out of here when your time is done." The boy nodded with the wide, uncertain eyes of someone who is trying to memorize everything at once. Emeka recognized those eyes. He had won them once. "And one more thing," he added. "Whatever I ask you to do it well, not just correctly. There is a difference." 2 years after his settlement, Chukwuemeka Okafor married Adaeze Eze. The wedding was 2 days, the traditional ceremony first, then the church, as was the way of their people. The compound in Nnewi was decorated with George fabric in green and gold, and the music began at noon and lasted until the generator could no longer justify itself against the quiet of the night. Mama Emeka danced. She was not a woman who danced easily or often, but that evening she danced with the full weight of her gratitude, her wrapper swishing, her arms raised, her face tilted up towards something invisible above the canopy lights that swayed gently in the night air. Emeka watched her from across the compound and felt something shift inside him, a final settling, like a house that has finished finding its foundation. Adaeze appeared beside him, her bridal beads bright against her neck, and followed his gaze to her mother dancing. "She prayed a long time for this day," Adaeze said quietly. "She prayed for everything," Emeka said, "including things she didn't know she was praying for." Adaeze looked at him. Like what? He thought of the corridor in Kifogbona's compound, the mite, the perfume, the cold finger of dread on the back of his neck, the choice he had made in the dark when no one was watching. He thought of how the story could have ended differently, how easily, how completely it could have all collapsed. Like the right kind of trouble arriving at the right time to show a man what he is made of. Adaeze searched his face for a moment. Then she took his hand. "Come, your mother needs someone to dance with." He let her pull him forward, into the light, into the music, into the life that patience had built, step by step, year by year, choice by careful choice. And Chukwuemeka Okafor danced. There is an Igbo proverb that the elders do not say loudly, but say often. Oge na-agafe, mana ihe oge na-bụ adịghị na-agafe. Time passes, But what time carries does not pass. A man's choices follow him like a shadow. Make sure yours walks behind you and not ahead of you, blocking the light.